Hi guys, so in today's video we're going to be taking a look at lead loading, or soft soldering as it is also sometimes referred to. We've got currently this bay window camper in, which we've had to put a new window lip in. Now, although everything's nice along the welded edge, you're always going to get a slight tiny bit of pitting on something like this. Some of the old metal was a little bit thin, and obviously you've got the nice fresh metal, so there's just one or two tiny little pinholes. Now, normally I guess people would just use fiberglass or filler in there, but we want to leave a full metal seal on it, so that everything's nicely protected, everything's metal before we start doing any bodywork or anything over the top of it. I'd rather that than just fill it full of filler and end up with a half done job. Now, the kit that we've got, we actually had from a place called LB Restoration Services. I will leave the link in the description to this soldering kit. I spoke to the seller and they were quite happy for me to link the kit, as it is quite a decent comprehensive kit. Now, the kit itself comes with tallow. Now, tallow is used as a lubricant for the wooden paddle, to stop the solder sticking to the wooden panel when you're flattening the solder out. This also comes with the kit. The kit came with 2 brushes for applying the flux. The kit that I got, I think, was around £59. It's got a decent amount of flux in there, which is good. And it also comes with 2 lead bars. Now, 1 lead bar I have already used on a job I was doing the other day, so I've partly used that one. But we've got plenty in this kit to get us going and to do what we need to on this van. So I'm going to stick my GoPro on, and then we'll get straight into getting some lead down, and we'll go through a step-by-step on what is, I suppose these days, quite an old school thing to do. But to me, it still does serve a purpose in restoration work like this, and also on some newer body repairs. So if you say doing some puller work on a car and your puller pulls a tiny little pinhole, rather than just filling over the little pinhole, a tiny bit of lead in there and a little bit of tin, and it'll soon cover those holes up, and you've got a sound metal repair, rather than obviously just filling it full of filler or fiberglass or something like that. So that's the area that we're going to be doing with it, along the top edge there, and we're just going to do the corners up there as well, just to make sure that everything's nice and sealed and it's got some nice sealed seams. So I'm going to stick the GoPro on and we'll get straight into it. So a major part of this is metal prep. You want to make sure that your metal is prepped up really nice and squeaky clean before you even begin any of this process. Now, extras that I've got some wire wool. I've obviously got a body file. We've got a blowtorch. Now, a standard blowtorch will do, because you're only melting lead. We're not trying to like get metal red hot. And also some leather gloves, obviously, just because of the heat we're using. I'm using some leather welding gloves to protect ourselves as the solder gets hot, as we warm that in our hand, and just to reduce any risk of burns, obviously, from the hot metal that we're heating up. Now, the flux is a water-based flux, so you can, if it does dry out a little bit, you can just add a touch more water, but always give this a really good stir before you even start. Now, personally, I prefer to give the area that we're going to start off with a real good coat of flux, a real good thick coat, so that when we take this off and we clean this off in a minute, all this area will be tinned up nicely. Now, you need to flux and tin all this area up before you start putting the lead down, so that it will give something for your lead to stick to. And this is another reason why you need to make sure that all this area is perfectly clean metal before you start. If there's any paint or anything left on there, then obviously that is an area that you will not be able to flux and tin, and if you cannot tin that area, then you will not be able to get the solder to stick to the body of the vehicle that you are doing. So once you've got a significant amount of flux on the area that you're going to do, then we need to prepare the next things that we need. So the next bits that we're going to need are the wire wool and also the blowtorch. Now, you can do this with a damp cloth, or you can use wire wool. I personally prefer wire wool because it seems to get into the areas a little bit better to clean up the area that you flux in. Now, you might have thought it was a bit strange when I said that this is obviously a water-based flux, but at this stage now, this is very important. This is the point where we are going to be melting the flux and getting it to adhere to the vehicle's body, but also we want to make sure that we evaporate and burn out all the water within this flux. Now, as you can see, there's little areas there that are starting to come up really light grey and drying out like there. So that is an area where all the water is burnt out, and we're burning all the contaminants out of the flux and also the excess water. Now you want to do this, I would say, an area at a time, so you can try and keep the area nice and warm and giving yourself a manageable amount of area to work to. Now once everything is burnt out, we'll scrape across with the wire wool, and that will take all the contaminants off the surface and then leave you with that lovely shiny silver tinned area. Now you need to make sure that you keep this nice and warm and liquefied on the surface as you're doing this, hence only doing this a small section at a time. We're not rushing trying to do that whole section. We'll do a piece, then warm up a little bit more and carry on and carry on. Now obviously working with lead is quite a dangerous substance as far as obviously health and safety wise goes, which is the reason why I am doing this in the spray booth. I've got this in the spray booth, I'm wearing my mask, and also I have the spray booth turned on a spray cycle, so it's keeping the air constantly ventilating through the spray booth and keeping clean air flushing through the booth all the time. And that's another reason why I've got the van parked in this way. I'm closest to the filters, so the fresh air is actually coming straight across the front of this and at me, so that all the way through this I have a constant flow of fresh air. Now the next stage would be to warm up the solder bars. Now you do not want to liquefy this solder bar, you just need to make it like an almost very thick spreadable butter kind of consistency. So we're warming the panel slightly to melt the tin surface on the layer, and we want to just be warming this bar up to, I'd say, sort of like the consistency of ice cream, if you will. It doesn't want to be liquid, but it doesn't want to be solid. So you can just literally, as I am there, warm up the body, warm up the solder bar slightly, and then just literally push the lead onto the panel to the area that you want to use it. Now, it's not very often that I do lead work, but on jobs like this I like to use lead rather than filler. So I did get a little bit carried away with the amount of lead that I used on this. I probably could have used a little bit less. I think for this whole window I used like 1 bar in effect to do this window lip, because as I was going I just kept spreading the lead across, but I could have probably doubled up the distance between those spots of lead that I was putting on. Now if all goes well as far as applying the lead, and at the end of the day it doesn't matter if you put too much on, because at the end of the day you can always file it back down or spread it out a little bit or take a little bit off if you want. Use your blowtorch just to warm the tallow, and then what I will do is I will use one of the wire wool pads just to spread it around the paddle. Now you just want a very light layer of tallow across the wooden paddle. The whole point of the tallow is just to lubricate the wooden paddle so that the solder will not stick to the paddle. If you put too much in, then you can create pits or actual almost like channels running through the soldered surface, which we don't want. Obviously we want a nice clean soldered surface when we're done. Also, once you've done so much, you will find that the solder starts to stick a little bit to your paddle, so you will need to reapply solder. Now as far as the lead on the body goes, again we don't want this to become a liquid, you just want to get it to that nice consistency again. So we're only warming this up just enough so it becomes pliable and malleable. We don't want this to turn into a complete liquid, because if you do, I can guarantee you it will just run straight off the front of this van. So we're just getting it warmed up enough to a pliable state, and then we will use the wooden paddle to smooth it out into the rough shape that we want. Now lead is not as easy to work with as body filler, which is probably one of the reasons why 9 out of 10 shops would just throw this front full of filler rather than leading it first and then putting a tiny finishing skim just to get the final shape. Personally, I think the right way of doing this window lip would be to lead this window and leave all this fully sealed in a metal finish, and then just use a tiny little bit of finishing filler after it's been epoxied to get that final finish. Now don't worry too much if it does look a tiny bit of a mess when you're done, just because we obviously are going to file this down and refine this further. So I've gone ahead and skipped and spread all the lead around this whole front end. As you can see, it looks a little bit rough, but we're not too worried about that. What we've got is this whole section with a nice coat of lead, and then we're going to take the flexible body file, which is a very coarse file. which we use for metal and bodywork. We're also going to be wearing our gloves, and we've got our mask, and I will be using a little bit of P40 just to refine some of these areas. But again, unless you are wearing a mask in a massively ventilated area, do not under any circumstances sand lead. I am only going to be sanding the lead at a later date because I am in the spray booth and I have a massive amount of ventilation in here, as well as a mask to help me protect myself from the lead. Now I'm going to be turning the flexible file so it has a slight outward arc to it. These flexible files are really good, so it's got a slight bow facing upwards as it was sat there, just to make this a little bit easier to start filing. Now you can literally just use this as you would a normal metal file, but obviously these body files are extremely harsh. So the plan here now is a little bit like filler. We just want to now bring this lead down to a sort of the right rough shape and also the right level that we want for this window lip. Now I suppose one downside to lead is if I'd have filled this, I probably could have had this whole job and this whole bit done in around about an hour, whereas I spent around about, probably, I'd say including filming it, I spent around about 3 to 4 hours on this front section here. But for me, I would rather spend 4 hours on this front section and have this front section be right and also be a really long lasting repair, because it is lead, it is not filler. It's going to last a lot longer than, you know, filling it full of polyester filler or filling it full of fiberglass. And you can see it, the center section now has all been roughed down with the file, so that's all to a stage where I'm happy with it with the file. And then I'm going to skip forward and basically use a little bit of, we use the file all around the edges, and then use a little bit of that P40, obviously again with the spray booth running, with a mask on in an extremely well ventilated area, to finish this whole front end off. And this is how it's turned out in the end. So that now is all the lead work complete. You see, we've covered up all the welds, all the pinholes, everything's gone, everything's looking good. We've rejointed the seams, so not only now they've been welded, but they've been leaded as well, so that's going to leave a nice strong metal finish on all that. We're going to need to epoxy this before we do any more work to it, to make sure everything's perfectly sealed up while all this metal is nice and fresh. But overall, that's come out really nice now, and it's going to leave a really good, nice, lasting repair to the window lip. Now, as I said, I will leave a link down in the description for the lead loading kit if any of you guys are interested. They do a lot more stuff than just lead loading kits, so do take a look around our website. It's a really good kit. We've not been sponsored or sent this kit in any way. It was a really good kit that I managed to find on eBay, and the guys there were really nice and really helpful, and it's a really good quality kit. So I thought I'd leave you guys the link in the description, because you can find a really nice, decent lead loading kit at a decent price as well. So that's it for today's video, guys. I hope you guys have enjoyed this look at a bit of an old school repair method, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.